Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. My guest today has worked at multiple institutions during her training as delegate of Spain in the European Federation of Psychiatric Trainees and in the Institute of Personality Disorders in New York. Her first contract was at the Day Hospital for Adolescents in El Viso, where she spent 3 years, after which she dedicated herself to her private practice. In addition to her medical profile, she is the founder and director of 2 startups, Unique Social Events and Clever Family app. She experiments with the use of music as a vehicle to stimulate the limbic system to promote empathy and movement. As a talent coach, she promotes the duo guitar-cello with a triple objective: treating patients, breaking the stigma of mental illness, and promoting the talent of the members, leading them to unite the 2 worlds of classical music and rock. Please join me in welcoming our guest today, Dr. Helen Trebbau, to The Conscious Artist. Dr. Trebbau, I'm thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. The honor is mine to be here in your podcast.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I'm fascinated to know more about what led you to the path that you are currently on today. Would you mind sharing with us how you became interested in the field of psychiatry?
Well, during my medical training, what I saw is that the pain that hurts most is the one that we cannot see. It's the pain of the soul, the pain of the mind, the pain of the emotions. And usually people take really good care of the people that can see the pain. If you get a broken arm or if you have surgery during the post-surgical. But for mental illness, there was very little approach, or the approach was more basic. So that's why I decided to go into that world of the pain that cannot be seen. And actually, it's one of the most rewarding because you get to see the developing of the patients and hidden talents that are just underneath fear. So my passion is to uncover those talents, take out the fears, and to see the blossoming of the person.
That's so beautiful. And I think that's such a valid and important point that you've highlighted, that we often don't focus on the pain that we can't see. It's funny, I always say that we go for annual physical checkups, or we go to the dentist to have our teeth cleaned once or twice a year, and we take our car in for an annual checkup, but we don't think about it in the same way with our mind.
That's correct.
Our mind is what keeps us healthy, first and foremost.
That's correct. Fortunately, I think everything is changing at this moment. I mean, I think during the pandemic, people have started to realize how important your mindset is, how important your mental health is. So we are seeing a different approach in the consults right now, both in the public practice and the private practice, how the people come into the office. Because also we have the stigma of being a psychiatrist. We have all these films and movies which portray us as like we want to drug the people, or we want to do just electroshocks and all these terrifying things. And the thing is that science has developed much more that at the moment we use medication in very low doses and very few side effects. And we need to do the other approach that were done in the past. So right now it's very much more united also with human arts, with the artistic side.
It's so interesting for me that you speak about the stigma on your side of the table, because I think most of us think about the stigma from our side of the table as patients, thinking that if we have to go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist, that there must be something wrong with us. This is how we've been conditioned to feel and to think over decades and honestly, even centuries. And you're absolutely right that it's now today, things are starting to change a lot more. And I am honestly somewhat grateful to the pandemic, because that was the time that led me to start therapy, because it started to become part of everyday conversation.
That's it. And as you say, the general stigma was of the patient. Is the patient going to be violent? Can I trust that person? Is it going to be predictable? Or maybe, do not go out because that person had a psychotic episode before. You don't know how it's going to react, or better not to live with that person or to share a job with that person. The main stigma was with patient, but what we now see is not only the patient and it's not only the physicians, the mental health group that works with patients, but also society. Within the consultation, the patient itself says, I don't think society is going to take me in well. What if I come back to work and they all going to stare at me differently? What if I'm going to be differently in my family? And that is actually, we are having some stereotypes of how the society is going to react to us. So at the same time, we have three stigmas in the patients, in the therapy, and in society itself, how they're going to react. And surprisingly, we're seeing other kinds of reactions within society at this moment as well.
I'm very grateful for the evolving reactions and response of society and the fact that more and more workplaces and bosses and people are more open and more amenable to the idea of promoting mental health awareness and a healthier place for their clients or for their employees in the working environment. But it's not always the case. And a lot of, for example, with musicians, we tend to face a lot of mental health problems on a daily basis, not so much because of bad working conditions like there could be in other fields and other workplaces, but because of the daily pressures that we have and that we put on ourselves. Because it's a very demanding field to be an artist, to have the kind of discipline that we need, the kind of resilience, the kind of inner strength, and the ability to be able to cope with constant rejection. And so I'm curious to know, from your perspective as a psychiatrist, what has been your experience working with musicians? Because as I mentioned in the intro, you promote a musical group. And so I'm curious to know what's been your experience working with musicians and how you have related music with psychiatry.
Indeed, as you very well described, usually the patient that comes in being a musician has a really high sense of perfection that he has to achieve, a very high ideal self he has to achieve. So it's not only pressure from outside, but also from within. And what that does in the brain is that we have a release of very high amounts of dopamine when we do play. It gives us a pleasure in doing that, but at the same time, the stress hormones. So we have very high cortisol and very high adrenaline. Those two hormones are great for small moments, for acute moments when we have a concert and when we have to achieve some specific work. But if we have that in constant basis, if we have the high cortisol or high adrenaline in the constant basis, then we lose the ability actually to really concentrate. And what we're looking for, that ideal, starts to fade. And we start having not only problems within work, but also within outside our work. We have problems with our families. We have problems with our friends. We tend to forget things. They usually are being called, you are in your own world, because the hyper focus, which is really good for acute moments, it's not very functional for everyday life. So what we do actually during consultation and bringing out the talent is to do the opposite. What we do is to bring down those stress hormones and to bring in other parts of life. We need a balanced person to be able to achieve the perfection that he wants. So instead of actually focusing in obsessive thoughts and obsessive discipline, we need to go the other way around. We need to balance. We need to have time for sports. We need to have time for friends. We need to have time for families. And that way, when the person is focusing on their instruments, then the prefrontal cortex, which is the director of the orchestra within the brain that we have, works at his optimum level.
I love that you put it that way. I think it's so important to have that balance in life, and that's not something that I think many musicians were taught in my generation and in the older generations, because I always used to feel even a little bit of shame and guilt that I didn't want to be obsessed with music all the time. And I will put a disclaimer that music is something that I cannot live without. Music fills me with joy that is beyond words and fills me with a deep sense of purpose and contentment. And I want to have a life. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not something
Mm-hmm.
that I feel I was necessarily encouraged to do by musical society. My parents were very supportive in always encouraging me to, spend time with my friends or do well in academics in order to have a more well-rounded mind and therefore well-rounded life. Because if we're only thinking about one thing all the time, that obsession can become, as you say, hyper focused, and then we lose the ability to see clearly and to have a wider perspective, right?
That's it. And actually, doing these other activities enhances the musical outcome. Because when we do these other activities, we create new connection, new path. And the more path that we have in our brain, which is the white substance, the more intelligence there is, the more connection between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And that, at the end of the day, works even better for the musician itself. So when you do exercise, when you have a regular exercise routine, we have that increase of dopamine, we have that increase of endorphins, serotonin, and that as well then helps you again with the prefrontal cortex when you have to focus. When you have time for meditation, when you have time for just the inner world to shut that mind, because if you have that circuit going and going and going and going, that burns a lot of ATP, lots of energy. So at the end of the day, you are with low energy. So when you have that time for you, that space for meditation for yourself, then you have increased energy. When you have time to be with your loved ones, you have increase of a hormone called oxytocin, which does the bond. And when you have that bond, then that person feels more secure. Confidence is inside. So you don't have that voices inside of you. You're not going to do well. You have other voices inside of you. Ah, you're doing amazing. You're making me laugh. You're making me happy. So that bonding with the more people, the more significant bonds that we have, then those voices are going to help us perform during the day that we want to give up the most of ourselves.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because as a child and as a teenager, I spent a huge amount of time practicing and focusing on music. And really, that was my whole life. And today, I will prioritize resting, exercising, sleeping, and eating over practicing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
know that if I'm tired and I try to force myself to practice, it's going to be useless. If I don't sleep well, I'm not going to have the energy physically or mentally to do the work that I need to do. If I don't exercise, my body physically feels weak and therefore gets more tired sitting at the piano, and my mind is more fogged because I haven't gotten that burst of dopamine and serotonin and everything that
Mm-hmm.
comes with exercising and keeping yourself healthy. But it's been a struggle. And I remember in the last season, I was speaking to one of my guests about the benefits of meditation. And I was telling him that I feel bad saying it, but I think I do prioritize these things over practicing piano. And he said, "Why do you feel bad saying it?" And and that was only half a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see the development of oneself as well, unlearning so much societal conditioning and pressure.
That's right. That's right. And you get me here to a very interesting concept, which is the K, the love for knowledge. K, love for knowledge. That's something a psychoanalyst, Wilfred Bion, described at the late 1800s. And actually, when we have high K, is when we are more curious to do more things. But the thing that links in here is to be able to have more K, to have more connections within our brain, you have to play. To be able to be very creative, you really need to think you're playing, because it is within playing that we can make mistakes. And if we are on the other side, obsessive of not making mistakes, on being perfect, then we do not allow ourselves to develop, to being creative. So this concept of the K, and Donna Winnicott, another psychoanalyst, very focused on creative on how to be more creative. This is the basis of it. You have to be able to play, to make mistakes. It doesn't matter. And that's the only way that we can evolve, that we can make new sounds, that we can do innovations, that we can try new things. And actually, by playing, you're going to be a better musician, either in the classical world or in the rock world or in the pop world, in whichever world you are going to be. By playing, by bringing that childhood again feeling, you're going to be able to even connect more with people.
And would you say that this is directly connected with one's ability to connect with their own inner child?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So within the psychic, we have three instances. We have the adult, which is me here, which is the one who takes care of my daily basis. We have the parent inside, and we have the inner child. The parent is everything that we must do, what we have learned from our parents, what we have learned from school, from society, the shoulds that we should do. And then we also have the inner child that comes out when we play. If we have the ability of connecting our adult while working with our inner child, oof, that's when the magic comes in. Because the things here, as you say, that musicians are very disciplined. And usually they connect adult with the parent, with the shoulds, what it has to do, which is a really good thing because that's why you get really far. But if you're able also to connect with that inner child, that's when innovation comes in. That's when, wow, magic, something transcendental happens.
Wow. You know, it's interesting because I remember probably it was within the first 2 weeks of working with my therapist. So, like 2.5 years ago. And she had me do an exercise one session where she asked me to write down all of the noise that I felt was in my head from myself, from my parents, from society, from culture, from friends, from partners, everything that I felt I should do, I must do, I have to do. And I started writing down this list, and it started out with, I should be kind. I should be a good person. I should be a good daughter. I should be a good friend. I have to be hardworking. I have to take out the trash. I have to clean the house. But it just went on like this. I remember I wrote for 2 pages all the things that I felt obligated to do. And at the end of those 2 pages, I just started crying. And it was like uncontrollable sobbing because I felt so weighed down by all the obligations that I was holding on to myself and all of the obligations that I was carrying on my back from generations or culture or society. And I went back for my next session and she said, now I want you to take that paper and everywhere you wrote down, I should, I must, or I have to, change it to I choose to, I want to, or I don't want to. And I have to tell you, it was the most liberating experience of my life because taking responsibility for the choices that I can make. It's not that I have to be a good person. I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. It's not that I have to be a good friend. I want to be a good friend. I choose to be kind. I choose to be hardworking. And sometimes I choose to be lazy and I choose to rest. And that's all fine. And if I don't want to take out the trash one day, okay, don't. But,
That's right.
but it was such a liberating experience. And it was like the first time somebody had given me permission to ask myself, what do I want?
And that's the adult talking. That's your adult choosing of what I have learned or I have built up in my parenthood in my brain. And what does my inner child say? And the adult is the one choosing. Okay, from here, from there, from here. And today I turn this way and the other way. And having control of your life to being able to be your adult, it's an amazing experience. Amazing. And to be able to switch, it's amazing. And to be able to have permission, inviting your inner parent and inviting your inner child, it's amazing.
Wow, really, truly incredible. It really is. I'm curious to know more about how we can, as artists, access not only our inner child, but the freedom to let go of the societal pressure and conditioning that we feel when we're on stage or when we're about to go on stage, where we feel that like the whole reason why we get nervous, the whole reason why some people have stage fright or panic attacks or anxiety, performance anxiety. I'm curious to know more concretely what it is that we can do, what you can share with our audience to help us find a way, as you were mentioning earlier, not to obsess over all of the mental stress and the difficult things, but how to connect more with the joy and the reasons that we're playing music in the first place.
Well, as you say, to be able to find that joy is to be able to feel that you're playing. That it's not life and death of what it's going to happen in that stage. That you're playing with friends along. If you're able to be playing with real good friends, that's the top of the line. But if not, to try to feel that you're playing with co-workers that you really enjoy. That in one sense, to be able to connect with a playing sensation. And the other more practical, because this is more difficult, the other more practical is to be able to introduce in your daily life, and specifically the day before performing, these other things that do not involve studying or performing. The need for good night's sleep, as you say, sleeping. If we do not sleep well, we do not learn, because it's in sleeping when we consolidate all the learning experience, the muscle memory. It's in the hippocampus, and the brain needs to go into deep sleep, which is phase 3 and phase 4, to be able to learn unconsciously, which is what you practice every day. I mean, your fingers move without you even thinking. So good night's sleep is actually the best way to rely that your brain is learning what you need to do that day when you perform. The other pillar is what you said before, also eating. Our brain, our body works with proteins. We need to have a good intake of proteins to be able to develop these hormones, neurotransmitters, and to be able to develop that movement. Prior conversations, we spoke about the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is part of the brain that controls movement, and not just movement by walking, but those very tiny movements that specifically musicians need to be able to control. Those very slow movements, which are the most difficult ones, the really hard ones, the most gentle ones, that precision. And well, besides good night's sleep and eating, then the other ones, exercise and meditations. So my recommendation is that before having performance, take time just for yourself to bring down the levels of cortisols and adrenaline, to be able to fulfill yourself with those other hormones, which are serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin, being with friends or someone that we really appreciate that can give us confidence, and to have exercise. So at the end of the day is, do not hard work just moment before the performance, but to do the other way around. If we make ourselves strong, have strong connections, brain connections, neuronal connections in the rest of the area beside the movement during concert, then when we go into the concert itself, it's gonna go automatically.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering now, maybe that's why instinctively some people always think it's very funny, but for me on a concert day, I'll practice in the
Mm-hmm.
morning, but what's most important for me is to take a
Yes,
nap and to eat dinner before
that's
the
right.
concert. Like I'll eat a full dinner, and it was always like protein and carbs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
chicken and rice or eggs and potatoes or something like this, that was something that was solid to give me stability and to give me
Mm-hmm.
energy. And for me, I don't like, if I don't practice the day of a concert, that doesn't stress me out. It'd be nice to, but it's not a problem. But if I don't sleep and I don't eat, I don't have the energy to play.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. So exactly. So focusing on the other pillars, so you can build the building that you want to build. Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of musicians that I know, a lot of friends of mine that cannot eat the day of a concert or before the concert because it
Mm-hmm.
makes them feel ill. And so is that just simply everyone's body is different, right?
Yes, 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 yes. You do have to know your body, your metabolism. So, as you say, for you, really works the really good dinner. And during that day, it's better to have that resting time, the mind resting time, and eating, but not really big meals itself.
Well, it could just be me because I'm one of those people that live to eat. So for me, it's breakfast, lunch, dinner one before the concert, and dinner two after the concert.
And I do have to say here, science does work. Right now, we're working in the office in the consultations of psychiatry with probiotics, and I have been amazed this past year of how probiotics can help us with our second brain, which is the fastest brain, the gut brain that we have all in our guts. And I think it's going to be work really well for musicians because it's more connected to the autonomic nervous system, not to the conscious, but more to the unconscious. So if we have a stable microbiota inside our guts, I think also that's going to help. With right now, that's experimental, but what I've seen during this past year that I've been trying it out, it does help a lot.
That's very interesting that you bring this up because I often feel that there's a relation between the mind and the body. And when we have physical illnesses or physical injuries, that they're often a result of some sort of mental health decline or mental tension. What has been your experience in seeing the relation between the two?
Oh, it's a direct relationship right now. Before, you would thought that the mind was something different and the body was another category. Right now, it's absolutely everything's related. I would say that more than 90% of what the illnesses in our bodies comes from some instability in our mind. And the first one is, for example, our skin. Embryologically, our skin and the brain develop together when we are in the womb of our mom. And you can see it directly when we are nervous, then we can have rashes or atopic skin or that goes directly as inflammation of the skin. And this also can come in the gut system or you can see it in other areas of the body. But the skin is the first one that you can relate.
Okay. And what about when we have some sort of physical injury or physical pain in our bodies? For example, I don't remember exactly what the relation was, but something about if you have pain in your back, it's often related to emotions. Is that correct? I mean, I'm generalizing. It's not a blanket rule, of
Exactly.
course.
When we can say pain in the back, it could be the trapezius, which is diamond muscle that it contracts because of tension. So generally, it's because of some emotional process that you're passing that gives us tension. But yes, I mean, the body speaks. So it's not that this emotion does this. I've heard some things that when you're stressed, you get to have cancer in your thyroid. Yes, when you're stressed and if you have hyperthyroidism, then you have many symptoms that resemble to anxiety, which is not being able to sleep, insomnia, tachycardia, all this. But it's not as what you say, it's not as blank as this emotion does this in the body. Each person, it's an open book. So when a person comes in with a physical pain, first we need to see if there's something biological that it's obstructing the flow, for example, in the kidneys or in the gut system or in some muscle. And then we follow to see what is happening within the emotional system.
Because at the end of the day, everything is connected. The mind, the body, the gut, the soul. I mean, everything is connected and it's not possible to separate one from the other.
No, 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 because the nervous system touches, irrigates just like blood, every system. And we have two main nervous systems, which is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the one that activates you, is the one that you have to hyper focus. You have the adrenaline running, you have the tachycardia. So it affects not only the sharp of your mind, but also it affects your heart, it affects your blood flow, it affects the gut. You cannot eat at that time. That's why when you say that musicians cannot eat that day, is because that's high adrenaline, and then the gut tends to close itself. But the other system, the parasympathetic system, which is the one that's stimulated by the vagus nerve, and that's the probiotic stimulate the vagus nerve, brings us the calmness, brings down that adrenaline, opens up more the gut system. It brings down the heartbeats. So we can play with both systems. We need both systems. And both systems have actions in every single part of our body, from our muscles to our digestive systems, to our hormones, to our kidneys, to everything.
This is so fascinating for me. And I mean, I've seen literally with my own physical eyes, but also my inner eyes with my body and the way I feel as I've started learning more about the connection between the mind and the body and our emotions and the body, how incredibly intertwined everything is, including healing. And this is why I think it's so wonderful also the way you are using music as a healing tool. I'd love if you could tell us a little bit more about guitar cello, the duo that you promote, and how you are using this beautiful way to help combine music and psychiatry and the intertwining healing of both.
Well, this is a beautiful story, as you know, and that's where we met actually in a concert of guitar cello. And for me, it's actually living my dream because I chose to study medicine, but at the end of the day, I love the arts. But yeah, I was like, well, can't do both. You have to study so much in medicine that I don't have time for the arts. And at the end of the day, the world brought me art within the office. And the thing here, the key was what we mentioned earlier about playing, try new experiments. So what happened was that I met Antonio 7 years ago. So imagine this classical musician improvising with an electric guitar. And then they started playing by decomposing rock songs and playing it in guitar and cello. And it was first an electric guitar. And they started with the first song, which I love, "Here Comes the Sun" by the Beatles. And when I heard that, that to me was the inner child, both of them playing. And I've never seen Antonio so expanded, because the word is that it was him, but it was even more than him. He was really connecting to other areas of himself he had not connected before. What we did at that time was like, okay, Antonio, we got our objective of you as a patient having back your confidence and being able to be playing at the orchestra. Let's go to another step. What if you give service to someone else that needs it? Can you play with guitar and cello these melodies, and specifically Led Zeppelin's "Stairway to Heaven," to a kid that just had an accident and it's coming out from 2 months coma, and he cannot connect to the world? Can you play to him? So it was the first time that Antonio Fernando, as guitar cello, played for someone else. And the reaction of this patient with neurological damage was to be straightened up to connect to the eyesight world, to bring up his arm, and with his hand to do the sign, the rock sign, and actually with more than voice itself. It was like rock and roll. And that to me was magical. That to them was magical. I mean, the kid connected with the abstract symbol of the hand of doing rock and roll, while his brain was full of blood because of the accident that he had. So that's when I see that the limbic system, it's amazingly powerful. The limbic system is the subcortical system where we have our emotions, where we have our fire. And if we light up that fire, then the rest of the rehabilitation in the neocortex, which is what goes above this limbic system, is what makes us think, what makes us walk, what makes us speak. If we light this limbic system, then that rehabilitation for the neuronal cortex is faster. It's much faster, and it's like a glue. It sticks on better. So that's the idea of using music. We have to see that each patient, which is the music that that patient really wakes up with, really lights up his fire. And that's when we use that limbic system to help him with other neurological aspects that he needs to work in.
Beautiful story. This is such a beautiful story, and it's so wonderful to see how many different ways one can heal through music and through accessing our inner child and accessing who we truly are inside. Dr. Trebbau, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing everything you've shared with us and for your knowledge and your expertise. I'm sure many people will be listening with a lot of gratitude. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pallavi, for inviting me here. And I really congratulate you for having this space that you have created, because it is very important to speak about mental health and actually to have the union of the arts and sciences. Us in the science field, we need you guys from the arts world, and arts needs science, so it's a great match. It's a love match.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page at Conscious Artist Podcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.